السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وبعد. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Inshallah, today I want to discuss some advice given by Ali radiallahu anhu to his son. So we take a journey back into history and we see that when Ali radiallahu anhu, he took office and he had become the Khalifa, he had become the leader of the Muslims, there was much opposition against him. There was many who were not in favor of him, and they did not appreciate or like the fact that he was in charge. And we know who Ali radiallahu anhu was. He was none other than the cousin of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was the husband of Fatima radiallahu anha. So he was someone who had a meritorious status, a virtue to him which none other could match. He was from amongst the Ashara Mubashara, those who had been guaranteed a position in Jannah by none other than the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So nevertheless, there was much opposition against him. And many groups had sprouted their heads at that time, opposing him. And finally, a few people got together and they plotted and planned to assassinate Ali radiallahu anhu. So they appointed a person by the name of Ibn Muljim, that your task is to go and assassinate Ali radiallahu anhu. So he came, he approached, he made his plan, he sneaked in, and he gave him that fatal blow, which ultimately led to the death of Ali radiallahu anhu. So when Ali radiallahu anhu had been afflicted with this wound, and the companions and his people around him knew that this is it, he is not coming back from this, they took him to his house, to his room. They put him in his bed, and at that moment, his beloved son, the grandson of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Al-Hasan radiallahu anhu, he walks into the room. And seeing the state his father is in, he begins to cry. And he is sobbing, and he is crying. And Ali radiallahu anhu, he addresses his son and he says, Ya bunay ma yubkik. Oh my beloved son, oh my beloved son, what is making you cry? What is causing you to cry? He says, Mali, what is wrong with me? Why should I not cry? How can I not cry? You are on the first day of the Akhirah, on the last day of the Dunya. You will be traveling to the Akhirah after today. And today you will be leaving this Dunya, you will be leaving us, this temporary abode. Why should I not cry? So he says, Oh my beloved son, I will give you 4 advices. And I will complement these 4 advices with an additional 4 advices. So in total of 8 advices. And if you adopt these in your life, and you make them a part and parcel of your life, then nothing will be able to harm you. You will not be able to go astray. You will stay on the right path. So he says, Oh my father, what are these advices? He said 4 and then another 4. That's a total of 8. What are these advices? And inshallah in the next few reminders we'll go through these advices and try to understand them. First and foremost, he says, Oh my son, inna aghna al-ghina, that indeed the best of wealth, the best of riches, the best of independence. Now when we think about independence, when we think about riches, when we think about wealth, what do we think? What's our perspective? What's our foresight into it? It's as somebody who's got a big bank balance with many zeros to it. Somebody who is well off. He's got the nice house, luxurious house. He's got a 20,000 pound car outside his house. Someone who can buy and spend without any problem. Someone who does not need to worry about where his next meal is coming from. That is a rich person to us. That is someone who we think is well off. But Ali radiallahu anhu, he did not say is the person who has a lot of money to his name. At that time he said that indeed that the best of richness is al-aql, is intelligence. And how do we measure intelligence? How do we measure intelligence? Is it someone who's got a degree, a BA to his name, a BSc, an MA, a PhD, somebody who we call doctor, somebody who we call educated, who's gone through the academic, method of studying? Is that someone who is intellectual? Is there someone who's got loads of titles before their name? Is that necessarily the intellectual person? No. Let's quantify it and let's understand what this al-aql is referred to. We open up the book Sifatu Safwa of Ibn al-Jawzi rahimahullah, and he mentions a quote of Imam al-Shafi'i, Muhammad ibn Idris, Imam al-Shafi'i, one of the four great Imams. And he says, Al-aqilu man aqalahu aqluhu an kulli madhmoom. He defines it for us. He says that the intellectual person, the clever person, is the one whose intellect holds him back, prevents him, stops him from doing every such action which is blameworthy. Every such action which is blameworthy. That if others were to hear about it, they will say, no, this was wrong, or this is shady. There's something wrong with that. Somebody has the opportunity to point a finger at you. That is something that our intellect prevents us from. And then we call that person aqil, we call that person intellectual. So when it comes to the laws of Allah, when it comes to the laws of the country, the laws of the land, if our intellect saves us from violating that, from putting us in a position where we become vulnerable and people can point fingers at that, then unfortunately, according to the definition of Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah, we do not meet the criteria of being intellectual. So when Ali radiallahu anhu, he is saying that the best of wealth is intellect, it's when our intellect prevents us from doing anything which is haram. Anything which will bring about the anger, the displeasure of Allah. So what we need to do now is we need to start thinking before we do. We need to take that step back and think, how will my Allah judge me if I was to do this? Will He be happy with this? Will I be rewarded for this? Or will it be that tomorrow on the day of judgment I won't have any answer in front of Allah? Subhanallah, it's come to such a point that now we can sin. And not only sin behind closed doors, we will record it, we will take a picture of it, we will snap it, we will Instagram it, and we will advertise it to the whole world. It's almost like a public declaration of rebellious characteristics against Allah, rebellion against Allah. It doesn't matter if I do it. I'm happy to plaster it to the whole world. That's not intellectual according to the definition of Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah. So when we know we've done something wrong, we know we have committed a sin, what do? We do it behind closed doors, but we have to ask Allah, oh Allah, please forgive me for it. We need to use our intellect. We need to be proactive and stop ourselves from doing it. And in that way, we'll be those who are amongst the most richest. That the best of contentment, as the Prophet ﷺ says, is the contentment of the heart. And what's the contentment of the heart? Is when our heart is pure and clean. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. When Allah mentions Surah Al-Shams, that indeed those who have purified their hearts, they purified themselves, they are the successful ones. And those who dirty their hearts, dirty themselves, have made themselves filthy, قَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. Those are the ones who have become the losers. So we make dua that Allah, He gives us the true intellect which allows us to stop ourselves from putting ourselves in a position in which we become blameworthy and others can point fingers at us. When the Prophet ﷺ says, وَالْإِثْمُ مَا حَاكَ فِي صَدْرِكَ, that ithm, a sin, is that which comes knocking and causing doubts in the heart. It comes knocking on the heart. So when we are about to do something, if we have doubts about its permissibility, if we have doubts about it, about bringing the pleasure or the displeasure of Allah, then we need to step back We need to contemplate, we need to reflect and think to ourselves, where will I find myself on the day of judgment? Will I be able to justify this in front of Allah or not? أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه غفور رحيم. سبحان الله وبحمده سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.